I'll never forget the night I said it, the words, the weight of them, the tension that filled the air. I had been wrestling with the thought for months, maybe even longer, but I was too afraid to voice it. What if it changed everything? What if it shattered us? But in the end, the pressure inside me became unbearable, and the question escaped my lips. After 7 years, do you think it's possible for us to have an open marriage? It was meant to be a casual question, a light-hearted suggestion, but in that moment I saw his face freeze. His eyes, the ones I had looked into 1,000 times, suddenly seemed distant. The smile he usually wore in my presence faded as if it had been ripped away. "What do you mean by that?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper, like he wasn't sure if he had heard me correctly. I could feel my heart racing. I had just opened a door to a conversation I wasn't sure I was ready for, and I wasn't sure he was either. My mind raced through 100 thoughts in an instant. Had I really just said that out loud? How could I explain this to him? "I'm not unhappy with you," I said, my voice shaking. "It's just, I don't know. I feel like we've grown stagnant. I need something more." His brow furrowed, and he leaned back, staring at me as if trying to understand a language he had never heard before. I could see the conflict in his eyes, the hurt, the confusion, the disbelief. "Are you telling me you want to sleep with other people?" His voice was low, almost incredulous. I nodded, feeling like I had just confessed something that was both freeing and terrifying at the same time. "Yes, but not because I don't love you. I love you, but I need to feel desired again. I want to explore things. I want to feel alive." The silence between us stretched, and for a few moments, nothing else mattered. His gaze shifted from my face to the floor, then back again, as if trying to process the impossible request I had just made. "How long have you been thinking about this?" he finally asked, his voice tight, controlled. I swallowed hard. "A while. Maybe longer than I should have." I could see him trying to swallow the hurt, the betrayal, and the confusion. His hands, once relaxed on the table, now clenched into fists. My mind screamed at me. Why had I said it? Why had I put us in this position? He stood up abruptly, pushing his chair back with a force that made the room feel smaller. "You want this? You want us to open up our marriage?" His words hit me like a slap. I tried to explain, to make him understand, but I could see that the idea was already poisoning his mind. It was like I had introduced a virus into our relationship that he couldn't shake off. The next few days were pure agony. He wouldn't look at me the same way. The intimacy we had shared for years, no matter how tired or routine, was gone, replaced by something I had never expected: distance. I had asked for an open marriage, but what did that even mean? Was I really ready for the consequences? I told myself I needed it. I justified it in my head, convinced myself it was just an experiment, a way to reignite something that had burned out long ago. But deep down, I couldn't help but wonder if I had just opened a door to something we could never close again. The truth is, when I asked for that open marriage, I had no idea how it would affect us. I thought it was just a simple request, something that would make me feel free again. But in reality, it tore at the very fabric of our relationship. The trust, the intimacy, the bond we had built over 7 years. All of it was in jeopardy. His reaction to my request was one I never saw coming. He wasn't angry, not exactly. He was hurt, devastated even. And I couldn't blame him. But what I hadn't anticipated was how much I would hurt too. How much I would second-guess myself. I thought that by opening up our marriage I would finally feel desired. I thought I could find what was missing in our relationship, but instead I felt emptier. The intimacy I thought I needed from someone else didn't come. It wasn't what I thought it would be. But then something unexpected happened, he agreed. Not right away, but after days of silence, of conversations, of back and forth, he agreed. He said, "If this is what you need, we can try it. But I want to be clear. We're taking a huge risk." I couldn't believe it. My heart was pounding in my chest. He was willing to open up our marriage for me, but now the real question lingered. Was it too late? Was the damage already done? I knew it wasn't going to be easy. I knew we would both have to navigate new boundaries, new feelings, new challenges. But as we ventured into the unknown, I couldn't shake the feeling that the very thing I was seeking, freedom, excitement, desire, was the thing that might destroy us. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that what we had wasn't just a marriage, It was a partnership built on trust, on vulnerability, on love. And asking for an open marriage wasn't just asking for sex with someone else. It was asking for something that threatened to break everything we had. In the end, I couldn't pretend to be sure. I couldn't pretend that I wasn't terrified of what would happen, because as much as I wanted this to work, I knew deep down that this wasn't just a simple experiment, it was a gamble. And with our hearts, our marriage, and our future on the line, the stakes couldn't have been higher. The days that followed were a blur. The air in our house felt thick, heavier than I had ever experienced before. There was no more casual conversation, no more laughter shared over breakfast. Even the way we looked at each other had changed. It was like we were two strangers trying to navigate a space we had once called our own, and now it was completely unfamiliar. I kept telling myself that this was temporary, that the discomfort we were feeling now was just part of the process. But as the days passed, that nagging feeling in the back of my mind wouldn't let up. What if we can't come back from this? What if the damage is irreversible? I tried to push those thoughts aside, focusing on the fact that my husband had agreed. He was willing to go along with this, despite how hard it must have been for him to even entertain the idea. He had always been someone who valued loyalty, who valued us, and yet, here we were, on the precipice of something neither of us could predict. Our conversations started to shift. No longer were we talking about the future, the kids, or the house. Instead, we were talking about boundaries. Limits. How far was too far? What was allowed? How would we navigate this new version of ourselves? And most of all, what would happen to us once we crossed this line? I could see the doubt in his eyes every time we talked about it. He was still processing, still trying to make sense of the emotional roller coaster that I had thrown us into. And to be honest, I was too. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had no idea what I was asking for. Was this really what I wanted, or was I running away from something deeper? One evening after dinner, we sat in silence in our living room. The tension was palpable. The weight of the decision we had made hung in the air. And then he said something that caught me completely off guard. "You know, I don't think this is just about sex for you, is it?" His words pierced through me. It wasn't just about that, was it? At least, not entirely. It wasn't just the physical desire I was craving, but the emotional connection I had been missing. The thrill of being desired in a way I hadn't felt in years. The excitement of exploring new territories, new relationships. But was that the answer? Could a single change really fix what felt broken? "I don't know," I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. "I guess I just feel like there's something more out there that I need to experience. I don't want to feel trapped anymore." He nodded slowly, as if understanding the deeper layers of what I was trying to say, but it didn't make it easier for him. I could see it on his face. He was hurt. Hurt because he didn't know how to give me what I needed. Hurt because what I was asking for felt like a betrayal of everything we had built together. We both knew that this was no longer just an experiment. It was a real risk, and the consequences were uncertain. Could we come out on the other side stronger, or would we be scarred forever? A few weeks later, things between us began to shift in ways I hadn't anticipated. I began to explore the idea of meeting others, talking to people online, engaging with strangers in ways that felt both exhilarating and deeply unsettling. But every time I did, a voice in the back of my mind reminded me that none of it would mean anything if I didn't have the emotional connection I was seeking. I went out with a few people. Nothing serious, just casual encounters, but each time I returned home, I felt more conflicted. I was physically satisfied, but emotionally, it was as though I was still trying to fill a void that only my husband could ever truly fill. It wasn't until one of these nights, when I returned from meeting someone new, that I realized something truly unsettling. I had been so caught up in my own desires that I hadn't considered his. What about him? How was he feeling? We had agreed to this open arrangement, but I had completely disregarded the emotional toll it was taking on him. He had kept his distance, trying to appear unaffected, but I knew him better than anyone. He wasn't the type of man to express his feelings easily, but it was clear that the changes were getting to him. One night, after I returned home from yet another meeting, he was waiting for me. The look on his face wasn't angry, it wasn't accusing, it was something far more painful. He looked broken. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," he said, his voice quiet but filled with intensity. I sat beside him, the weight of his words sinking in. For the first time since all of this began, I saw the full scope of the damage my request had caused. We had crossed a line, and even if we tried to go back, it wouldn't be the same. "I'm sorry," I whispered, tears welling up in my eyes. "I didn't mean to hurt you." He shook his head slowly, looking at me with a deep sadness. "It's not about the sex, is it? It's about everything. Everything that we were. And now it feels like we're losing each other." I had no response. What could I say? How could I fix what I had started? The truth was, I didn't have the answers, and neither did he. We spent the next few days in silence, the tension growing thicker. I tried to give him space, to let him process. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had ruined everything, but despite the distance between us, we both knew something had to give. Either we would find a way back to each other, or we would face the possibility that the damage was too great to repair. Finally, one evening, as we sat across from each other, I realized that the question that had been lingering for so long needed to be addressed. "What now?" I asked softly. He looked at me, his eyes tired but resolute. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I think we need to decide if this is worth fighting for." I nodded. "Do we even know what we're fighting for anymore?" The silence between us deepened, and in that moment I realized something that hit me harder than anything else. I didn't know if we could come back from this. I had asked for an open marriage to seek freedom, to reignite a passion that I felt had long since faded. But in doing so, I had opened a door to a world neither of us was prepared for. And now I had to face the consequences. Would we heal from this? Would we find our way back to each other? I didn't know. But what I did know was that, no matter what happened, this journey had taught me something vital. You can't change one part of your life without affecting everything else.